You're listening to episode number 134 of Becoming You Again. I'm your host, Karen Nelson. Welcome to Becoming You Again, the podcast to help you with your mental and emotional well-being during and after divorce. This is where you learn to overcome the grief and trauma of your divorce. We're going to do that by reconnecting with yourself, creating lasting emotional resilience, and living a truly independent life so that your life can be even better than when you were married. I'm your host, Karen Nelson. Welcome back to the podcast today. I am very excited for today's episode because I have a special guest and I am so excited for you to hear our conversation. My guest today is Leah Hadley. She is the founder of Great Lakes Investment Management and Great Lakes Divorce Financial Solutions, where she uses her 15 years of experience to help her clients make intentional financial decisions. Leah is amazing. She is a compassionate financial guidance expert. You are going to hear some of her story where she has had many financial challenges in her adult life, including adopting a sibling group out of foster care, which then made her a parent of 3 children overnight, then going through a divorce, and then building 2 businesses from the ground up. Leah is going to talk about how she has been able to use knowledge and education to help her create her own financial peace of mind. And she is going to be talking about how you can do that too. She is going to be talking about the common money mistakes that many of us make going through a divorce and how to avoid them. And then make sure you stick around to the end of the episode. Leah will be giving some incredibly useful steps to building your own financial confidence as a divorced woman. So you do not want to miss those useful tips. I am so excited for you to hear our conversation. And without further ado, let's dive in. Welcome back to the podcast, my lovely ladies. Today, I am so excited for my guest who is joining us. Her name is Leah Hadley, and she is a financial expert who works with divorced women to help guide them toward financial stability. Leah, thank you so much for being on the podcast today.
It is my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I'm so excited to have you here. I know this is a topic that so many, probably every single one of my listeners can benefit from. So I'm really excited to have this conversation with you. But please go ahead and just kind of share a little bit about yourself, give a little quick intro about who you are so my listeners have an idea of who Leah Hadley is.
Sure. So I live outside of Cleveland, Ohio. I lived here most of my life. I went to college outside of Philly and bounced around a little bit out after college. I lived in Baltimore for a little while, but I've been back here, oh my goodness, probably over 15 years now. I have 3 children, ages 11 through 16, who I adopted, all 3 of them at the same time as a sibling group out of foster care. My ex-husband and I did. Yes,
Amazing.
A blessing, but also incredibly overwhelming.
As any parent knows, right? Any parent can attest to that, yes.
But they are definitely the center of my world. And I did go through my own divorce after 10 years of marriage. I am now remarried, and I've been remarried now for 6 years. And I really am very committed and very passionate about empowering women as it relates to money. I actually have my master's degree in education. So I was a teacher before I got into the financial world. And I always share this story where I remember the first day I walked into an investment bank. Here I was feeling like an educated individual. My bachelor's degree was in sociology. My master's degree was in education. I had gotten burnt out in the classroom and I just needed a job. So I had taken a temp job as an administrative assistant in this investment bank. And when I walked in, I was like a total fish out of water. I felt like everybody was speaking a foreign language around me, like literally did not understand the words coming out of their mouth. And the reason why I share that story is because I think that for a lot of people who might be new to managing money or haven't managed their own money for a long time, or maybe just never learned to manage money, I get it. There is a whole language around it. And you add divorce to that equation, which also has its whole vocabulary around it. I just remember how overwhelming that felt. And that experience really informs a lot of the work that I do.
I love it. I think that's amazing. And I think you're right. I think when you go through a divorce, it's already like overwhelming and scary and all of the things. And then you add in this idea of, oh my gosh, now I have to be kind of in charge of my own finances. And I think that every person, women especially, should know about their finances, know what's happening, have say and savings and all of the things. And yet it isn't necessarily a thing that goes on. So that aspect on top of the divorce can seem very scary. And like you said, when you get around something and you maybe don't know that much about it, you aren't very informed, you might feel stupid. You might feel like, I don't know what to do. I shouldn't be here because I don't fit in. It's scary. I don't know what questions to ask. I don't know what steps to take. And it can be a very off-putting thing, I think, for a lot of women. And so they kind of stay back from informing themselves because they don't even know where to start. Because as you say, it can be so overwhelming, which is why I think this conversation especially is going to be gold for literally every one of my listeners, because we all have things that we need to learn, right? You had a master's degree, maybe not in finances, but you had things that you needed to learn, and you have this wealth of knowledge that you can really inform to this audience. And I think that is a beautiful thing. So again, thank you so much for being here and being willing to share your knowledge. Can you share with us a little bit of your story of divorce and raising kids on your own as a single parent, getting remarried, and even building businesses on your own to kind of take you through the life that you're in now, where you are thriving and really in a position where you can help other women who have gone through possibly some of the same things you've gone through?
Absolutely. So when I went through my divorce, my children were still pretty young. My youngest was still a toddler. I want to say maybe my oldest was something like 8 years old, somewhere around there. And my ex-husband and I actually did a lot of conversation and preparation around letting the children know that this was happening. But what we didn't do well is talking about what happened next. So we really prepared for this conversation and how were we going to answer the questions and all of the things around that initial conversation. And so that actually went really well, thank God. However, the next year was a nightmare. My youngest used to scream and have tantrums when he would go back and forth between our homes. Now, fortunately, we were able to continue to be consistent, and that has made all the difference over the years. But it was heartbreaking. I mean, it just tore me apart to have to be consistent under those circumstances, because all I wanted to do was just hold him and be with him. So that was really, really hard. And my ex and I at the time, that first year, we could barely be in the same space. There was just so much anger and so much hurt. And it just, that first year was really difficult. I mean, I tell people, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. Like it was a season. And we kind of found our way. We found our groove. We are very, very consistent in terms of scheduling, and we're also flexible with each other. We do give each other a lot of space and grace, and that has been wonderful. We have really figured out this whole co-parenting thing in a very meaningful way, and with teenagers, that is so helpful.
Yes.
And it's been, I mean, we're much better friends now, however many years post-divorce, probably almost 10 years post-divorce, than we were when we were married, honestly. But it's because we choose to really work on that relationship and communicate consistently about the children. We actually have dinner as a family, both of us with the kids, about once a month or at least every other month. So we really try to be a united front. We have the difficult conversations with the kids together.
Yes.
And so we take the idea of co-parenting very seriously.
I love that. I'm so glad that you shared that with the audience, because I think that's really important. I think co-parenting in and of itself can just be difficult, right? We can't control what the other person is doing, but we can control how we want to show up. And often the way we show up can inform to the other person how they are allowed to show up as well. It doesn't always happen that way, but I know for myself, I can relate with so much of what you're saying. And I know that there are other women who have gone through the same thing who feel that same way. I'm going to show up in this relationship the way I want to be. I'm going to be the person I want to be. And the other person then follows. And I love that you were able to figure that out with your ex. I think that's a beautiful thing. So keep going. Story is amazing.
So that first year also, though, financially was very difficult. So I was on my ex's health insurance at the time. And my income wasn't such that I was in the financial space to be able to take on that expense and be at the same level of income that I was at. I had to take a job change to be able to increase my income and have health insurance. I took on a much more stressful, time-intensive job in order to have better benefits and all of that. That didn't work. I was sick that year. I mean, I had all kinds of issues that first year, and I'm sure it was like the stress of the divorce and all the things, right? And so ultimately I got let go almost a year later from the new job, and was applying for other jobs, looking at other opportunities. My kids, because, we did adopt them out of foster care, they have a lot of challenges, and we have a lot of support in place, different therapies, lots of appointments, and we needed to be able to get them to place. And finding a new employer that was going to give me the flexibility that I needed in order to be able to make that happen was just, it wasn't working. I mean, I interviewed a place. I will say I have an amazing network. I have been in, the investment world, financial services for a long time, even at that point. And so I did have a lot of opportunities to consider, but they weren't going to work for my life. And ultimately, I decided the only way I was going to be able to truly commit to my priorities, which were my children, really, and even myself, like having the flexibility of what I wanted and, to be there for what I valued. I wanted to start my own thing. And so I started Great Lakes Divorce Financial Solutions initially. I was already a certified divorce financial analyst at that time. I became a mediator, and I was working with people and supporting them through the financial decisions that they needed to make through the divorce process. And then we had people who would come through their divorce with us and really want ongoing financial planning and investment management support. And I had been a financial advisor previously for several years. And so I opened up my own investment management company. And that way, if people did want to come on long-term, we could provide that support. And then that one just kind of grew on its own. So under that umbrella, we work with all kinds of folks. People refer their brothers and their sisters and their, parents and kids. And it's been wonderful because, the divorce work, which I absolutely love doing, it's very personally rewarding, and people are so grateful for the support. But it's hard. It's a tough space to work in. And under that umbrella, we get to celebrate life with people, new babies and first homes and retirements and, all of those different things.
Absolutely.
And so it was scary at first, though. I'm not going to pretend, Karen. I was starting from ground zero and, figuring out how am I going to fund this thing, and how am I going to get clients? And I was never into marketing. I didn't know anything about marketing. I was always in the financial world for all of those years and had these great analytical skills and had a lot of missteps initially. I took on all kinds of financial analysis projects just to, pay the bills and have money coming in the door. But when you're distracted by doing all these different things, you're not focused in growing the business. So the business grew slower at first. But then once I started to really get focused and targeted, I have a wonderful team that provides great support for our clients now. And it's just been an amazing, if you asked me 10 years ago if this is where I would be, especially in the middle of my divorce, I think I literally would have just laughed. You gotta be kidding me.
Never. I love that. I love that you share the idea of really taking a look at, you're looking for jobs and you're thinking, what am I going to do in this situation? I need to have income. I need to be able to provide insurance for myself, for my kids. I need to be able to be there for my kids. I want to be a parent who is available to my children. That was a priority to you. And I think really taking a step back and going, what's out there is not necessarily what is right or good for me. And I think a lot of times, even faced with that kind of scary decision, we will say no to ourselves, because what we think we want is the security that might come with a paycheck from someone else, right? And I'm not saying that security is a bad thing. It's not. It's that can feel very good and feel very safe. But I also think sometimes we know inside that what we truly need is something else, and we need to figure out how to create that for ourselves. And I love that you were able to recognize that and give yourself permission to go after that, because that can be a very scary thing. And yet, look at you now. Like, look where you are now. Like you say, 10 years ago, if you would have asked, you never would have envisioned this, imagined that you would be here. And yet you have built these businesses for yourself. You've created probably whatever kind of schedule you need or want for yourself, for your kids. And that really adds to the richness of creating an amazing life outside of divorce. I love that. I love that you've been able to create that for yourself. So tell me more. What kind of challenges did you face as you're starting this business and as you're trying to figure out what my next steps are going into this financial world for yourself?
So when I had started at the investment bank, I was in the equity research department. That's where I worked as an administrative assistant. And I didn't know anything about equity research. I didn't know anything about stocks when I got into that department. But I was able to learn a tremendous amount from the analysts and ultimately became a publishing senior equity research analyst. So along the way, I had taken a ton of accounting classes on the side. I had gotten all my licensing exams. I read probably every book that was published at the time, although there's so many more nowadays. But anyway, and so I had just done a tremendous amount of understanding how businesses work, how businesses become profitable, right? And understanding investing within a business and how to grow. And so looking at it, big companies, right? Like not, my little teeny tiny company, but I think having that background was so valuable. And so, initially, I created that business plan. I wrote it out. I applied for funding to help me get started and had a plan to really execute on. I have gotten coaching every step of the way, Karen.
Yes.
Like I said, I was not a marketer. I've never had that, marketing, advertising, like none of that sales. I was an analyst, and I analyze everything to a ridiculous and that saying, like, what do they say? Paralysis by analysis. Like that's a real thing.
Yes.
And knowing your own shortcomings is really important. And I think that's where that coaching along the way of getting out of your own way and helping to understand the worth, the value that you're providing. When I first started, I way underpriced my services. And I had a business coach that really pushed me hard. I'm like, no, you are providing so much more value than that. And so all of that was very, very important in my journey. Even, learning how to think about creating roles within the company and what kinds of support I needed and all of that. I've never done anything in a silo. I've always been a member of different organizations, professional organizations. I am very active in the National Association of Women Business Owners, NABO. And so really having all of those people who I can lean on and have a cup of coffee with and be like, this is my challenge. What do you recommend? Like, do you have any resources, or have you ever dealt with this? Or, all of that has been so incredibly beneficial for me. And also being open to not doing things the way everybody else does them.
Oh, I love that.
So especially in the financial world, the financial world has a way of doing things. They have a way of doing business. And when I first started, I kind of felt like I had to do it their way, because I didn't necessarily know that there were, you could do it. For compliance reasons, there are reasons why you actually have to do things certainly. There's laws in place, but understanding and working with a compliance consultant to see, well, where can I be creative, and what opportunities and how I can really serve people. And I think that was one of the things that frustrated me so much, even when I worked as a financial advisor for a broker dealer, was that I would see these people coming in and needing help, but the way the services were offered, it wasn't what they needed, So where were they going to get the help that they needed? And so what I looked at was what are people asking for? What kind of support do they really need? And what kind of support do they need that they don't even know to ask for? And how
Yes.
can I structure services in order to really meet them where they're at?
Yeah. And I love, okay, I'm hearing a couple of different things. Like number one, your willingness to really step out of your comfort zone and learn about things that you didn't know anything about. I think a lot of times when we don't know what we don't know, we are very afraid of that idea. And it's safer inside emotionally, right? And it feels more comfortable to say, I don't need to know about that. It's okay if I don't learn this. Like learning can be hard, especially when we're, adults and we're out of school and it's not a thing that we do on a regular basis. It can feel very uncomfortable and much easier to just say, I don't really need to know that. So I love that you recognized like, I'm surrounded by these people who know more than me. There's coaches out there or whoever, right, that I can hire who know these things that I don't necessarily have the intelligence of yet, but I can learn from them and I can put in the work and take these classes and do these courses and whatever else goes into this and do my own part to learn and grow, which I think will serve anyone in any capacity, whether or not you're starting your own business or maybe you're going to just learn about what it takes to, communicate better with your ex, or you're going to learn,
Right.
how to be a better, more informed, emotionally adult parent to your children, or like there's so many. Those are just two that have to do with divorce specifically. There's like a million more options of ideas that we can do for ourselves to create learning and understanding and know more about being a human in this crazy world, right?
Absolutely.
And then I also love this idea that you're taking a look at something that is like, this is the way it's always been done, right? And of course, yes, like you say, there are regulations that you have to follow. But outside of that, like even just looking at it from a divorce perspective, I have so many clients who come to me and who are like, I'm trying to redefine what my life looks like now. I'm trying to redefine what it means to be a family or what it means to be a mother. And society doesn't really jive with this idea of being someone who's divorced. Like, yes, it happens, but we're labeled broken families, or our family is ruined, or there's something wrong with me, or, any of those labels. And so when we can take a look at something from a different perspective, whether it's from financial perspective, you're looking at things and going, what are these people, what are these women really need? What are the services that are really going to serve them? And how can I do that differently than what is being offered right now? Because what's being offered is not necessarily serving them. We can do the same thing as we are divorced people. We can look at our lives and decide what it is that we actually need. We don't have to define that by this box that society has said, this is what we have to stay inside. So I love
That's right.
that
Yes.
you've been able to step out of that and kind of define it for yourself, define your own business for yourself, and really, add that value to the women and the other customers who are clients, I guess maybe is a better word, who are coming to you for help. Can you kind of walk us through some of the common mistakes that you're seeing as people who are coming through divorce that they're making as they're going through the divorce from a financial perspective, and kind of warn us so that we can avoid those pitfalls as we, step into and go through divorce?
I love this question because there are so many, Karen, and people just don't know what they don't know. And it's so important. And I tell people, and it's a weird way to think about a divorce, but for most people, a divorce will be the largest financial transaction of your life.
Yeah.
And most people are not getting financial advice on the largest financial transaction of their life, right? The first thought that most people have is, I'm going to call an attorney. An attorney absolutely lean on for legal advice every day of the week. That is so important.
Yes.
But there's a reason that we get hired by attorneys all the time, right? And so it's so important to really fully understand the both short and long-term implications of the financial decisions that you are making. And right now, in particular, the economy that we are in, different market conditions that we're in right now, the decisions around the marital home are very, very challenging, right?
Yes.
So we have seen the values of houses go up significantly over the last several years, but also mortgage rates have risen 2, 3 times what some people have on their existing mortgage. And so as people are negotiating, there are people who are coming to agreements that in reality cannot be executed upon. And so it is so critical that you don't come to those agreements, that you don't finalize an agreement that you cannot actually implement, that you do the research and understand what goes into actually executing upon that agreement, making sure that if you say that you're going to be able to refinance within 90 days, that you actually have the income to support it, and that you're going to be able to afford that new payment based on, whatever terms that you're looking at in the current market conditions, right? If you are saying that, you're doing something down the road, and this I see a lot with mortgage, people are getting creative, and I get it. Like these mortgages are a big deal. I get these interest rates.
Yes.
They're amazing, right? But people are coming to these agreements where they're planning to do something down the road. Well, first of all, it's important to know in terms of the IRS code that you have basically 6 years to settle financial assets related to a divorce. And so people are coming up with these agreements like down the road, this is what's going to happen, but they're not putting language in place that really protects the agreement. And I see all kinds, one of the things that I do is I will review settlement agreements for essentially what I'm looking for is risk. I may also be considering, is this a fair division, or is there something else that might be missing or you should be considering? But a lot of what I'm looking for is risk, financial risk specifically. And so I will see these agreements and I'm like, oh my God, I can think of like 1,000 different things that can go wrong under this agreement. And no, this language does not protect you in any way, shape, or form, right? And so really understanding those agreements that you're making, what are you actually agreeing to? But one of the things that surprised me the most in doing this work is that people get so tired from the divorce process, right? You're like,
yes,
it's a lot.
It is a lot.
Especially if you go the litigation route, it could be years. I mean, it's a lot, right? But even if you have a shorter process, it's a huge life change, and big life changes are tiring for people. It's the emotional, it's the mental. I mean, you're just so much you're going through that. And so I get where it comes from, that people don't actually execute on the agreements that they make. And so we will have people contact us 2, 3, 10, 15 years down the road where they haven't actually settled their financial assets post-divorce. So I highly, highly encourage people to go through, when your divorce is final, go through that settlement agreement and make yourself a to-do list. Like read it word for word, make a to-do list, what assets need to be retitled, give yourself a deadline. If you need support on a particular change, write down who's going to help you with that, what resource do you need, what information do you need in order to make that happen. But stay on top of these things. I just did an analysis from a divorce that finalized 20 years ago. And I get it. Like the other thing that comes up, people are definitely tired, but a lot of these things that are being divided are retirement assets. And they're like, I'm not going to retire for another 20 years.
We'll think about it when that time comes. Yes.
Well, now here we are 20 years later doing this financial analysis project, costly financial analysis project. And there was a lot of legal documentation and legal expense associated with this had to get filed with the court. Because they just didn't take care of it 20 years ago. Like this all could have been avoided. And so it's really, really important to follow up on all of those loose ends. And I always tell people, even if you're one of those people listening and you were divorced 5 years ago, please still reach out, as soon as possible, because, we absolutely do help people untangle the mess. And we, have done it plenty of times. But if you can do it right after your divorce is final, that is so much better.
I love that advice. I think, and I just, before you continue with these amazing, by the way, common mistakes that we need to watch out for, I just think that idea of creating a list, it's like you're creating your little map of what do I need to be paying attention to? Because I think you're right. I think the tendency is like after the divorce decree is signed, we want to just take a breath and be like, I don't have to think about this anymore. But you kind of need to think about this a little bit more. And it doesn't have to be from a heavy, like scared, terrorized place where, oh no, I've got to get all of this stuff done. But create the list of like, step 1, get this title name changed. Step 2, like whatever. You don't even have to put them in order. You could just pick and choose which ones seem the easiest and go from there. But having that roadmap of the things that need to get done can be so useful. And then it's not just running around in your head. Write it down and then it's out on paper and you can free up some headspace for some much needed, maybe breathing room and, room to think about some other things once that divorce is finalized.
And I will tell you that this advice is coming from somebody who many years post-divorce filed her quitclaim deed on the house. So it was like, what do they say? Like the shoemaker's shoes. You're like, yes. Whatever, So I've been there. I understand. Like, it's just one of those things. I'm not sure who to call or where to go or what. Anyway, yes. We'll help you figure it out. But the other thing to keep in mind as far as settling the assets go is some of these agreements, the way they are written, you may be losing out on tens of thousands, if not more, because of not taking care of it. So if there are specific dollar amounts that are getting distributed, you're missing out on the investment opportunity of that money. And in some cases, the retirement plans will not calculate gains on the distributions. And so it'll be as of whatever that date of the division is. Right. And so if that was even 10 years ago, money could have doubled and you would lose all of that gain. So it is really important even
to jump on it.
So many other risks too, but that's an important one. But another really big one, and this is very, very common when I'm reviewing people's potential proposals that they're looking at, is not fully understanding the taxes associated with the various accounts. It's really interesting. A lot of cases when people are working with their attorneys, there are these spreadsheets that get passed back and forth, Karen, and they may have like account 1, account 2, whatever the accounts are listed along the one side, and there's a value of that account. But it doesn't always say what the account type is. And in some cases, it may see like Fidelity, and there may be 4 accounts at Fidelity. One might be a traditional IRA, which is pre-taxed and growing tax deferred, will be taxed as ordinary income if withdrawn after 59 and a half, could be subject to early withdrawal penalty if withdrawn prior to 59 and a half. Part of it could be in a Roth IRA, which is going in after tax, but growing tax-free and will be able to be withdrawn tax-free in retirement. One could be a brokerage account. There could be very low cost basis on some of those assets within that brokerage account. So there are all different kinds of taxation on these assets. And within those brokerage accounts, a lot of times, and people will do this for us too, they'll send us like a screenshot of just the value of the account, not even necessarily the underlying investments. And we need more information because it's a big deal if you have, the same stock, you're saying like each of you are going to get half of that stock, but one of you is getting it at a very low cost basis and the other is getting it at a very high cost basis. Yes. Well, the after-tax value of that stock is very different, right? And sometimes you have assets in that account that cannot be divided. And so you're coming again to agreements that can't actually be executed upon. And especially if you're in a contentious situation, there you are post-divorce trying to get the stuff filed. Yes. And it's like, oh, we're running into some issues here. And now we have to figure out what to do with these things. Another really common one that people just don't think about at all, these annuities, a lot of times people have different annuities in different places. Some of them have riders on them. A lot of times, if you are dividing an annuity with a divorce agreement, you're losing out on a huge amount of that benefit associated with like an income rider, for example. Right. And so the person who maybe originally owned it might be able to retain a portion of that benefit, but the person getting the distribution might be not getting any of it. So that 50-50, what looks like 50-50 on paper, is not actually equally valuable. Yeah. So really understanding the value of these things, and it's not just that value that's showing up on that screenshot or on that statement. It's so important to make sure accounts are titled correctly in your paperwork. I just had a case where we were working, and in the paperwork, it said there was a 401k. This employer doesn't even have a 401k. They do have 3 other different retirement accounts, but none of them are a 401k. And so that actually did require some additional legal fees in order to get that modified with the court, which so much easier to get it done ahead of time if you're
if you know, able
to identify information.
Yes. This is so interesting. I just did an interview with a family law attorney a couple of weeks ago, and she kind of reiterated the same thing, not about the finances, but just about this idea of information. Like, information is key to everything because it informs all of your decisions moving forward. And so the more informed you are about the finances and what's inside this account and what I will get if we split this 50-50 and what you will get and what it all looks like, all of that information is only going to help create a better picture for what your life will look like outside of the divorce. And the more informed you are, the easier it is for you to decide, okay, from here, this is what I know I will be getting outside of the divorce. Do I need to get a job? Do I need to start a job? Am I able to stay home with the kids for this many? Do I need to just work part-time? Do I have investments that I can live off of? Maybe I need to move in with my parents for a little while. Like, maybe I need to lean on, whatever. It just gives you a better idea of what that life is going to look like outside of the divorce, which can just in and of itself offer so much peace and emotional stability, knowing a little bit more about what is to come.
That's right.
Yes. So is there any other common mistakes that you're noticing that you want to add on?
Oh, I could go on and on, Karen, but I will just leave you with one last one.
All right, one
and
more.
That is to prioritize liquidity. So having cash gives you flexibility. Having cash savings, having liquid assets gives you flexibility. And a lot of times people spend a tremendous amount of cash savings during the divorce process itself. A lot of times people are very focused on retaining fixed assets like houses or vehicles or other things that they may have a sentimental attachment to. And just from a financial security standpoint, having access to savings in order to deal with some, unplanned things can be really important.
Yes, I totally agree with that. I think that is a huge, huge part of moving forward. And again, it's this idea of like creating security for yourself, emotional security to where you trust yourself and your decisions, but also financial security, which is going to help add to your own emotional security, knowing that things are going to be okay. And when you have that liquidity available to you, that can definitely add to that feeling. So how can women who are coming out of divorce really step into building financial confidence for themselves?
Yeah, there's a few things that I recommend. If you're somebody who is super stressed and worried about money, the clearer you can get about the specifics of your worries, the more you can create a plan to address them. And I'll give you an example. Sometimes people are very worried that they're not going to be able to pay their bills. Like, very specifically, I'm worried I'm not going to pay my bills. And so getting very clear on what are your sources of income and when are you going to receive them? What are your expenses and when are they due? And going through that exercise in great detail can give you a tremendous amount of confidence that, yes, I can pay my bills, and I know this is scary, but it's good to know if there is a cash flow issue that you can make a plan to deal with it. Yes. Either increasing your income and I always try to focus on the fixed expenses first, reducing your fixed expenses. So that way you make the decision once and they're going to be down every month going forward. But pulling back on expenses can be really important if you need to. And keep in mind, it might just be a season. It may not be forever. Yes. But if that is a serious worry for you, take the time to take a step back and really figure out if that's a real problem or not. Yes. And if it is, take the steps to create a plan to deal with it. Don't just let it be that like worry sitting there and keeping you up at night.
This is 100% like awareness is key. You always have to have awareness moving into anything, because there will be no change, there will be no understanding without that awareness. And so I love the idea of not being afraid to take a look at, what are my expenses? Because maybe I can actually afford them and I just don't know. And if I truly can't, and I've taken a look at everything, what can I cut? What is the bottom line here, and what has to go? Or can I bring in extra income in a way that will allow me to, pay my bills in the way that I want to, live the life that I want to? I love that one.
Yeah. So if your worry is, I don't know if I'm going to be able to make my settlement last. Can I make my divorce settlement last, or am I going to run out of money? Or I hear, for whatever reason, I always hear people say, like, am I going to have to live off of cat food in my old age? Cat food is kind of expensive, whatever. I hear that one a lot. Create the plan, go through the financial planning process and go through the steps and figure out, do you have enough for your settlement to last? Like, there is a lot of analysis that goes into it, but it is an exercise that is doable. Yes. And you may need to make some adjustments. You may need to insure better for unexpected expenses. You may not have enough risk management, proactive risk management in place. And that may be something that you need to deal with. You might not have your investments handled well. You may need to optimize them and minimize your expenses, so that way you are growing your investments. Yes. And they're going to last you longer, right? Again, you might need to reduce your fixed expenses. There's a lot of things you can proactively do to make your settlement last longer, but you may also find out that, yeah, this is a real risk, and maybe I need to go back to work, or work, a little bit more, make a little more income now. But have the answer. Like, don't just sit there in that worry, yes. If that's what's bothering you. But I really think helping to really get clear on knowing what's bothering you is going to help you to take the steps to create the plan that's going to give you the confidence. But the other big thing when it comes to financial confidence is forgiving any past financial mistakes. So many people have tons of shame around financial blunders that they made in the past, or maybe just a lack of financial literacy in general, especially some of the very high achieving professional women that I work with who have really excelled in other areas of their life. And here they are. I literally just was talking with a woman. She's like, I'm so well educated. And I've even, like, in this particular woman's case, she has worked in financial services before. We get hired by lots of accountants. The thing is, when you're going through the emotion of divorce, yes. It doesn't matter what your professional background is. Like, you're cloudy. Like, you got that, like, brain fog.
It's so true.
And everybody needs support in different ways. It's not going to be the same for everybody, but it's important to be aware of if you need that support, to really reach out and get it. But if you've made those financial blunders in the past, don't let them stand in your way of asking for help.
I love that.
It's okay to say, like, this has happened in the past, or for a lot of people, they may have had messaging throughout their marriage, you're no good with money, or you spend too much, or there's all kinds of things that people hear over the years.
Yes.
Nobody is born knowing how to manage money well. It is a skill that gets acquired over time. And, when we learn, like, think about learning to ride a bike, right? As you're learning to ride a bike, most people don't just get on a bike and start riding. You're going to, like, stumble a little bit. Maybe you're going to fall off sometimes. Yes. But as long as you keep getting up and trying, at some point, you're going to get to the point where you're confidently riding that bike, right? And so if you just stop, that's where, you don't make the progress and you never develop the skill. Yes. But if you can forgive yourself for those stumbles along the way, that's huge. And continuing to take that action and to show yourself, I'm not going to give up. Even, reaching out to financial professionals, you might have a negative conversation. You might have somebody who's condescending, or, all kinds of things happen, right? That's not a reflection of you. That's a reflection of them. Move on to somebody else.
Yeah, it's almost like when you go to choose a coach or a therapist, and you pick one and you're like, they were just so mean, or, I came away from that just crying the whole rest of the week and I just didn't feel good about myself. And it's like, okay, you don't have to stick with that one person. There's lots of therapists out there. There's lots of coaches. There's lots of financial analysts who can help you and who are going to connect with you in the ways that you need. Don't feel like you have to go with the first one just because they happen to be there in front of you, right? But I love these ideas because it really goes along with, I think, the theme of this whole podcast episode of education. Educate yourself. I love this idea of forgiving yourself of your past mistakes. I think so often we carry that shame with us of like, but I made this mistake, or I just haven't ever known about this. And so I must be so stupid because of that, or like whatever the story is, right? That we've got from our past. It doesn't mean that has to be your future. You have the opportunity to inform yourself of these new things, have an understanding of where you're at, and decide from there what you want your future to look like, and go after someone who can help you create that by knowing the things that you don't know and helping you in the ways that you don't know. I love it. Anything else that you want to leave as a final note for my podcast audience today?
I will just say that regardless of where your financial knowledge is, regardless of what your divorce situation is, if you make the decision that you want to improve the outcome, if you make the decision that you want to optimize your finances, that's the first step, right? Like, yes. And so make that decision, and then take that next step. And as you take each step, your financial confidence will grow, improve to yourself. That I share with some of my clients, your beliefs become actions, and your actions lead to results, right?
Yes,
but
absolutely.
Sometimes when we are in the middle of the divorce, trying to get to that belief feels impossible.
It does.
So you can borrow my belief.
Yes.
But you can also just start taking those action steps, and that can help you to build that belief within yourself when you start to see those results. And so sometimes when we're in this messy middle, we can't wait to have that belief. We have to just start taking those little action steps in order to really start to see the results that we need. And when it comes to financial decisions throughout the divorce process, it can actually impact the rest of your life. And so it is really important that you're getting the advice that you need, that you have good guidance, and you feel confident in those decisions.
Beautiful. I love it. And I talk about this on the podcast all the time about just make a decision. You have the knowledge that your decisions are going to be right for you. It is inside of you. You just have to learn to tap into it. But I promise you, making a decision, and the more you make decisions for yourself, just like Leah said, the more confident you become. I love that. Leah, please tell my audience how they can find you if they are interested in your services or just wanting to know more about you.
Thank you. So we have a extensive blog on GreatLakesDFS.com. I have put a lot of heart and soul into it because I do think it's really important that people have good financial information throughout the process. So many free resources there. We do free workshops almost every month. So check that out and feel free to sign up for free workshops. I am on Instagram as Watch Her Thrive, and we also have a free Watch Her Thrive Facebook group.
Amazing. And I will have all that information in the show notes. So don't worry, audience, if you're listening and you're like, I didn't get to write it down. Don't worry. It's all in the show notes. You can just go there and click all of the information. It will be right there. Leah, thank you so much for coming and sharing your wealth of knowledge. Again, I think this is going to be so impactful for all of the women who are listening to this podcast and who are going through divorce. I really appreciate your time and your experience and you being willing to share it with us. So thank you so much for being here.
It has been my absolute pleasure, Karen. Thank you so much for having me.
Hi, friend. I'm so glad you're here and thanks for listening. I wanted to let you know that if you're wanting more, a way to make deeper, more lasting change, then working one-on-one with me as your coach may be exactly what you need. Together, we'll take everything you're learning in the podcast and implement it in your life with weekly coaching, real-life practice, and practical guidance. To learn more about how to work with me one-on-one, go to KarenNelsonCoaching.com. That's www.KarinNelsonCoaching.com. Thanks for listening. If this podcast agreed with you in any way, please take a minute to follow and give me a rating wherever you listen to podcasts. And for more details about how I can help you live an even better life than when you were married, make sure and check out the full show notes by clicking the link in the description.